Live everywhere.
Daily Kos Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Walton. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Tuesday, March 30th, 2017. I have to get on the air immediately to warn you. Watch out for all these sexy meals that are being eaten around the country. Apparently, this is a huge problem. I woke up to find out. I couldn't figure out who it was about at first, but I woke up to find everybody chatting on Twitter about, I don't know, somebody, a man who... and I haven't read the story, wasn't permitted to, wouldn't permit himself to. I don't know what I don't know. Anyway, it's Mike Pence, it turns out, is not allowing himself, maybe, somebody send me the story, please, to go out to dinner, or to be in a room, ever, I guess, alone with a woman who's not his wife. All right, okay, it's weird, but whatever. And congratulations to you. But I guess it also evolved into a discussion about going out to dinner with colleagues or something. I don't even know what the hell's wrong with this guy, Pence. And all I saw was people's takes on it. Like, he's so virile and heterosexual and upright and moral that he can't allow himself to be alone in a room with a woman who isn't his wife, because I assume... he won't do anything wrong, but God will probably impregnate the woman, and of course that's a gift from God, and you can't, so you're stuck with the baby at that point. I didn't even do anything. We were just going to have, I don't know, spaghetti. What? And I really don't know how we ended up here. Apparently, though, the problem with this country, too many sexy meals. That's a huge issue, and I guess there's also somebody else on Twitter, I guess, out there defending this. Is Matt Walsh? Is that it? I don't even know exactly who that is, but the name rings a bell. Is he a columnist? I don't know. Somebody straighten this story out for me. Armando, come on the show and tell me what's going on. It's Thursday. Maybe Greg has this story. I'll check his listings. I got to know what's at the bottom of this. I see what's going on with him. He's a weirdo. He's a fundamentalist, and he believes that I don't know. I'm sure he thinks it's inappropriate. But I don't know. Here's a tip. Just keep your pants on the whole time, and everything generally will go fine. I mean, there's ways to make trouble, I guess, but you really got to go out of your way. And these women constantly trying to seduce me with meals. I don't know what it's like for you, but the last time I thought, I think a casual meal between platonic friends of the opposite sex might be nice. And they were all like, oh, we got to try this great new all sausages and bananas restaurant. You're going to love it. It was totally uncomfortable. I really sympathize with Mike Pence and whoever this other dude is. It's got to be a huge problem. The sex meal trade is out of control, and we got to do something about it. Bill, thank you. I knew you would. I figured you're a good candidate to be on top of this story because it's so absurd. Pence's sexy dinner pronouncement is this administration's version of Ashcroft covering up the boobs on the Lady Justice statue. And I think that's exactly right. I don't know. What's even the equivalent of something like this? Yeah, I just had this vision of him covering up the Bob's Big Boy statue outside, but that's, I think, not the issue. I don't know if anybody's ever said that about Pence, but okay. Plus, that kid has at least overalls on him, and even a shirt under the overalls. That guy is fully dressed. I don't know. Are there any half-naked women statues at restaurants? None that I can think of. Anyway, well, I don't know. Anyway, we'll move on to some other things. I was more preoccupied this morning, as Bill saw in his morning tweet, the other one, in which he says that Daily Kos Radio is live now, which it is. Kagro X, me, David Waldman, will be delivering the rant you've been waiting for, 2 hours on Trump's lips, and we could definitely do that. I am, again, astonished by a picture selected by, well, The Hill. Everybody does it. Almost any photograph of, pardon me today, of Donald Trump has something wrong with his face. honestly. I mean, that's what it comes down to. But it's usually his lips, as we said the other day, trying to escape his face in one way or another. He's got his lips pursed here in this thing, but he is like a cartoon caricature, or as Greg often says, caricature, right? Is that the correct? I don't know. Anyway, he's always can't let his lips rest, this guy, and that doesn't even have anything to do with his Tic Tacs. There we go. Matt Walsh. I see Dante Atkins is retweeting this now infamous tweet from Matt Walsh. Who is Matt Walsh exactly? Greg, are you up to date on you can't go out to dinner with Mike Pence because you might have sex with him story?
No.
Yeah, I didn't think that would make your list, but it's a late breaker. That's why.
I
Don't
really,
worry about it.
honestly, I'm not that interested in Mike Pence.
I don't know that anybody is. I mean, I'm sure he and his wife get along fine. I can't imagine that there are women who are like, I came here to eat, but man, I got to have Mike Pence.
Well,
P-E-N-C-E. That's Pence.
Pence.
Yes.
There you have it. Can I take the show in a different direction?
I don't know. What do you want to eat?
I want to talk about Charles Gaba, and not about who he has dinner with.
I don't think there's any reason to have dinner at all, but all right.
Ever.
Yes.
So we have a guy we know known as Brain Rap over at Daily Kos. Charles Gaba writes a lot about healthcare and actually started compiling how many people are going to get covered by the Affordable Care Act.
Covered with what?
Covered by having insurance.
All right. Mike Pence has me all at
I know. He's got you all upset.
Okay.
So ACAsignups.net is something that he established as a blog. And it turns out he's been nominated for a National Institute for Healthcare Management Foundation, a nonprofit started 20 years ago by some of the insurance companies as a think tank.
Oh.
And he's been nominated for an award for a blog he wrote back in March of 2016 called Show Your Work, Healthcare Coverage Breakout for the Entire U.S. Population in one chart. And he looked at the total U.S. population of 323 million and also looked at the uninsured population of 29 million and started to break down in terms of who's got what, and noted that according to his numbers, there's expanded coverage specifically due to the Affordable Care Act at 23.6 million people. He has those who are and those who are not. The idea that if you follow these people, you get a much better sense of what's going on with the Affordable Care Act. And he's a good guy, and he writes about this, and I just thought we should credit him for a lot of what he's been doing. So if you also look at the other stories that were on that very same, in other words, he's a finalist.
Okay. I see. He's just happy to be there.
If you're looking at, some of the other people who were nominated, they're actually quite good, and helps to give you an idea of the quality of what Charles writes about. So I just wanted to, give him a hat tip for that.
Excellent. We should.
And note that it's a really good thing.
All right. Somebody give me a hat.
Other thing I wanted to start out with this morning is, I'm sorry?
I need a hat.
We should.
To tip.
Yeah.
I got like an official one.
I
should get a fedora. I'm a member of the. Maybe I'm a member of the press now.
Well, I have an indivisible cap.
Oh, yeah, right. That's right. You showed me. Yeah, maybe I should get one of those.
Yeah.
Made into a fedora.
Let's tap that to him.
Okay.
All right. I put some graphs up for you. You can find them. I think there was 3 in a row there. The first one was from Huffington Post, put together by David Rothschild, and looked at Trump approval on Huffington Post pollster, and found that for Democrats from January till now, his disapproval, Trump's is up to 84%, and approval's down to 13%. With independents,
13? Wow.
13%. It's pretty good. I want it down to 9, but we're working on it. Custom trend here is showing the disapprove for independents, and this is the important one. Disapprove is up to 55. And approve is down to 38, which is funny because that's about what it is on Gallup. We'll get to that in a minute. So it's the independents that really matter here. We know Democrats hate him. We know Republicans are okay with him. Republican approval is flat. It's 84% approval and disapprove is 13, kind of mirror image of the Democrats. And so the reason Trump's disapproval is dropping is he's losing the independents. I don't expect him to lose Republicans. Now, Trump voters are a combination of independents and Republicans. But the Republicans are going to, vote tribal, just like the Democrats are. So really, if you lose your independents, you start dropping your numbers. And how much further can Trump drop? Well, approval's at 37, and it can drop below that. He could also start losing Republicans. We'll see if that actually happens. But it's the independents, point I'm making here, is driving Trump's numbers down.
Okay. Good work, independents.
Yes.
Don't go out to a meal with any of them, but...
Other numbers, Gallup has Trump at 35% approval.
Okay.
35%. That's the lowest of his short career. And just a reminder, when Nixon resigned, he was at 24, so that's the floor. So, he's got 11 points to go.
All right, let's start working on it.
Up to 59. I mean, these are incredible numbers. Incredibly bad.
Yes.
Again, driven by independents. And then finally, if you want to take an aggregate and say, well, we're talking about the aggregates for the independents and Democrats and Republicans, but Real Clear Politics has approval overall at 41 and disapprove at 53. That's an 11.5 point spread, and the worst it's been. And so basically everything that Trump has done.
Their scale on that chart is pretty incredible.
I like it. It shows a big gap.
It really does.
So everything that Trump has done really hasn't worked, and I think that's really the point. So, just want to highlight that.
Yes, he has done things.
Right.
I mean,
He's
some.
done things. He has done things. So we were talking the other day about the fact that just as those independents can change their mind, Nate Cohen put together some voter file data to suggest that there's a small but significant number of persuadable voters who switched from Obama to Trump.
Yeah.
Obama to Trump. And, again, pointing out that we're talking about 80,000 people. That was the difference between Clinton winning and Clinton losing.
Ah, yes. Okay. Those 80,000.
Right. That's not a large number of people. So when we're talking about 5% of voters that might have switched from Obama to Trump or something, and it's just a guesstimate based on the voter files, that turns out to be a large number of people, and a large number of people matters. When you have such a close election, of course, everything mattered. Mm-hmm. But that Nate Cohen pointed out the other day, the switchers far outweigh the number of people who, quote, didn't show up. It wasn't really a they didn't show up election. It was those that did show up decided to switch votes from one person to the other. And that mattered. So interestingly, Amanda Mark had a piece in Salon this morning, which I do have on your Skype list. It's about in the middle there.
All right, I'll take a look.
And the title is intriguing. It's called New Election Theory. Did working class whites switch from Obama to Trump because the economy was better?
Okay, that is an interesting theory.
Are white working class voters only Democrats when they're down and out?
Huh.
The economy sucks. Do you have to turn to Democrats to fix it? And once it's fixed, can you indulge your racism and then vote for, the white guy with the Confederate flag?
That it would make an interesting theory because, of course, the white guy with the Confederate flag was busy saying how terrible everything was, and you were supposed to nod along, but I guess secretly say, but I'm doing pretty good.
There's flaws in the theory, but it's interesting anyway.
Well, okay, there's. It's not a surprise that they would have internally contradictory thoughts or whatever
people
you
aren't
call
rational,
them.
so that's perfectly okay. What Amanda writes is, as troubling as this may be to accept, she says, she would argue, that the 2016 election results suggest that a recovering economy allowed the small but significant number of voters to indulge their racism and sexism because they didn't have to worry as much about their economic futures. And I'm sure that's true for some of those voters. These numbers may indicate that Democrats don't lose because of economic insecurity, but because economic security creates complacency, which can lead to a Republican victory.
This is blowing my mind. I'm programmed for economic anxiety.
Well, but that's the problem with it. There are places like Gary, Indiana, and some of the other places that Armando's favorite whipping boy, Chris Arnaud, likes to go to, that in fact are not economically secure. And John Edwards, way, way, way back when he said there's two Americas, was kind of right about that.
2.5 now.
Yeah, well, so I'm not so sure that these areas that had these Trump switchers from Obama to Trump are so economically secure, and that's why I'm having a little trouble with the theory.
Okay.
Because what Amanda is doing is looking at the country writ large, but it's individual pockets that mattered. Anyway, what she also writes is, while there are some negative economic indicators from Obama's presidency, the overall story of the past 8 years is one about Americans becoming more economically stable. The introduction of the Affordable Care Act with the Medicaid expansion helped bring stability to white working class communities, in particular, such as in a Kentucky county that saw its uninsured rate decline by 60%. Access to health care is a critical aspect to helping people feel secure, something that's frequently overlooked by those touting the narrative of economic insecurity.
Okay.
It's interesting because throwing in the healthcare part of it, which was missing from the election, if only because Trump was BSing people so much that they never really had a chance to take him seriously. You saw all those stories out of Kentucky saying, I heard what he said, but I didn't really believe he was going to do it. Of course, now they do because that's what the bill was. And even afterwards, they're more likely to blame Paul Ryan and the Republicans in Congress than Trump because they don't want to
be the case.
Nonetheless, if you had added the economic issues of healthcare on top of everything else, might have been a different mix. However, it's just fascinating to look and see who those switchers are and why they switch. And I don't think that Amanda's wrong necessarily. I don't know that that's the whole complete picture. It's hard to look at, let's say, a 3-block area and say, let's just look at these 3 blocks and see what happens, and separate that from the town, and separate the town from the county, and separate the county from the state. If you look, large, you can see that a place like Ohio was not really fertile ground for somebody like Hillary Clinton, and that, she lost Wisconsin, she lost Michigan. If you look at individual areas like Macomb County up in Michigan, you could see some of the switchers and get a sense of what's going on here. My conclusion is that it's complicated because people are complicated, and there is no one theory that's going to wind up explaining all of this. But the bottom line is there are people that switched, and they can be persuaded by various and sundry things, and that's worthwhile to keep in mind when you're trying to move forward and see what happens next. On the other hand, the next election coming up is 2018.
True.
And 2018 is an off-year election, and 2018 is going to be a get-out-your-base election. 2018 is not the election that you're going to take this theoretical, that's an interesting thing about the Trump voter, and then apply it. What you might apply is, how can you go out of your way not to necessarily motivate them to come out against you? That's about as far as you could take that. But 2018 is going to be get out your own base. And we have an election coming up in Georgia 6, to replace Tom Price fairly soon. It's going to be in April. And we'll get to see how that plays out.
Mm-hmm. Okay. We'll be watching this play out. I'm going to take a look through this through the Salon piece, perhaps.
It's interesting and absolutely worth reading for everybody.
And it's got Armando interested. He's messaging in the background.
Armando likes any piece that supports what he already thinks, even when he's wrong. So he thinks this thing is wonderful.
It gives an opportunity to come in and say, "Chris,
it's like motivated reasoning." Look at this. It supports what I've always said. Well, kind of. It's interesting.
What did he say here? He just goes to McDonald's.
And takes pictures, right?
Yeah, all right.
So, anyway,
he's going to win a prize.
The more information you take in, you get to synthesize the whole big picture. And I think that that's something that, in fact, is going to happen over time. And I think it's still fascinating. I think the 2016 election, in a lot of ways, doesn't make a whole lot of sense. In other ways, it does. But when you try to fit it in with 2012, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but in some ways it does. And I think getting input from all of these different points of view, and synthesizing it and making sense out of it is a good hobby.
I
might even help you in the next election.
Oh, well. Okay, then. Again, Armando, accept it. If it's transactional, it's okay. I don't know. We'll see. I mean, it's interesting to see that this is the case with people. Although I am feeling at a certain point like, okay, you're beating me over the head with this. I understand that there are people out there who adhere to these views, who have all kinds of problems. I understand. It is. I guess at some point it becomes a little bit moralistic. But he's dedicated a lot of time to it. He's going to feel it very deeply.
He's got another theme, which actually fits in with something Ron Brownstein has written a lot about, and that's the educational divide, which, again, is, I think, one of those fascinating things. It's the non-college versus college and a little bit of the rural versus urban, and I think all of that, if you weren't aware of it before this election, you're aware of it now, and that's a good thing.
Yes, it's always good to be aware of things.
It is. Change subjects again. This is a piece by Taken Goddard, and it's behind a paywall, but I thought it's short, and I thought it was really good.
All right, let's cheat.
And I thought I would bring it to your attention. It's called Paul Ryan Makes His Biggest Threat Yet.
Really? And
this is part of the idea of what we need to do in terms of tracking and keeping an eye on what's happening with the healthcare legislation.
Okay.
And what Taken writes is, and I will tell you, I'm not just stealing his behind the paywall stuff. He's a good guy and a good analyst, and if you're interested in subscribing to his site, I would endorse it. I do. In an extended interview with CBS News, Speaker Paul Ryan discussed his failure to get Republicans in the House to pass a health care bill which would repeal Obamacare. He admitted his plan B was to keep talking to each other and figure out how we get the yes, which honestly isn't really much of a plan.
No, but it's a thing to do.
Yeah,
sure.
Well, that's what you say when you lose, right?
Let's talk to more people. Why not?
But here's the interesting part. He issued a threat to the conservative House Freedom Caucus.
Okay.
He was being interviewed by Norah O'Donnell on CBS, and he said, what I worry about, Norah, is that if we don't do this, then President Trump will just go work with Democrats to try and change Obamacare, and that's not a conservative thing. If this Republican Congress allows the perfect to be the enemy of the good, I worry we'll push the president into working with Democrats. He's been suggesting as much. Taken observes when he was pressed on why it's a bad thing to work with Democrats, he said, I don't want that to happen. You know why? I want a patient-centered system, which of course is complete bullshit. I don't want government running health care. The government shouldn't tell you what you must do with your life, with your health care. We should give people choices. So, taking notes, it's pretty extraordinary. Ryan used the threat of Trump abandoning his party in an attempt to get his party unified. And also that Ryan thinks bipartisanship is a bad thing.
Oh.
And it gives you an idea of what's going on right now in the House with Republicans. They're not only completely divided, and they really haven't a clue as to how to unify themselves. So Ryan is trying to do what Trump did during the election, use Clinton as the boogeyman. In this particular case, he's using Democrats as the bad guy, trying to get his own party to rally, in a tribal way around himself and what he's trying to do. And as to how well it's going to work or not work, you're actually talking about actual legislation here, and it's not an election, so there's limited amounts of tribalism here that I think are going to hold. It's just fascinating that he holds up the idea of actually working with Democrats as the worst possible thing that could happen.
Well,
Speaker of the House, right? Speaker of the House for everybody, right?
Yeah. Well, that was how he got the job. I mean,
Majority Leader is somebody else. He's the Speaker of the House.
That's true.
Third in succession.
Yes.
And he thinks, by definition, bipartisanship is a bad thing. Am I missing something here?
Well, it's bad for America. That part you're not missing. What he seems. Well, I mean, for him, I guess what we're missing is that's how he got the job. When Boehner did that and would work with Democrats to get important legislation passed, that angered his conference, and they ousted him and installed Ryan on the theory that it was bad to work with Democrats. I mean, it's a fundamental problem, I guess, of the Republican Party and conference in particular, and in the House, that they view things this way. But, I mean, I don't know.
I mean, I'm giving him a hard time. The fact of the matter is, from a politics point of view, he has to.
Yeah.
But I would still rather him attempt now and again to keep his Freedom Caucus in line, to occasionally take a bill and work with Democrats and say, you guys can't get too radical. because if you do, this is the other side of it.
Or at
the thing
least
that protects him is that nobody else wants that stupid job.
Yes, well, that's probably true.
So he could do a lot of things and get away with it that Boehner couldn't.
It's an admission he should not have made, and he could easily.
It's just that's one of those things you don't say in public.
Yeah, it's the kind of thing that you say the opposite, and then if your
Right.
Freedom Caucus gets upset with you, you say, you know, I have the big boy job here, guys. I'm the Speaker of the House. I'm a constitutional officer. I have to say things like "we're for
That's the
everybody."
way to do it.
And for
Right,
you,
right. If you're Donald Trump, you don't get. He does, but if you're Donald Trump, you don't get into the White House and sit in the Oval Office and say, "Basically, I'm here to screw the other party."
yes, not supposed
He
to
does.
do that. Yeah, he does do that.
And his base loves him for
That's why
it,
he's
but
terrible.
it's really not the politic thing to do, and that's why you lose independence.
Yeah. Well, Ryan is I guess he's a bit of a political realist in that sense, except
Is he that good at it? I mean, I just think it's kind of
accomplish
dumb. I
anything
think the
real.
smart thing to do would be to talk, conference unity, but let your people know that, in fact, there are times you will cut a deal with the other side if the radicals go too far.
Well,
Which, by the way, is what Boehner did, and I
Yeah.
think Boehner was better at it than
well,
Ryan
yes.
is.
And that's
What has
why he's
Ryan
gone.
accomplished?
Nothing. Literally nothing.
Boehner at least got some stuff passed.
Yeah. Maybe he was the policy wonk. Damn.
I don't know. I don't think Denny Hastert was the policy wonk either.
No. Well, depends what the
But I think
policy
that
is,
Boehner was a little better at politics than Ryan is, and I don't think he's particularly good at policy wonkishness. Well, we'll see. We'll see what happens. He's promised, basically this week that he's going to bring health care back. I don't know what that means. I don't think he's solved any of the problems within his conference, and it'll all be on display.
All right.
And as a matter of
Display
fact,
it.
if he does bring it back, that's just going to give Democrats another thing to run on. I just don't understand the wisdom of it.
I don't know. I'm not certain what's driving that. I guess it's my guess is that Trump thinks I don't know. I mean, Trump was ready to move on. I guess Bannon thinks that it's central to the Trump brand to never admit defeat in any way, so he's pushing to bring it back. And I don't know what they think they're going to force through. But I guess if it doesn't matter, then I suppose why not? Yeah, bring it back. We'll put something else in the bill and just, whatever we get, and just say it's a win. Uh-oh, we're getting a little static again today. Very
I don't
good.
hear that in my end.
Oh, I hear it on my end too. Oops. Stay calm, static. I thought we had that solved. Yeah. All right,
Anyway,
maybe it's
so
on
that's
YouTube.
pretty much it. There is one thing I want to leave you with.
Okay.
This is an interesting piece from the Incidental Economist by Nicholas Bagley writing about the complications of House v. Price.
House v. Price. Okay.
Used to be House v. Burwell,
Oh, yes. All right.
and he says he's got a piece at Vox discussing what happens next.
Okay.
Because here's the problem. Okay?
Yes.
There's an argument
Box.
as to whether or not the Obama administration did a legal constitutional thing by making cost-sharing payments to insurance companies.
Okay.
This was brought to a district court, and the district court entered an injunction prohibiting the payments.
All right.
And the injunction was stayed pending appeal.
Yes.
And then we changed administrations, and now it's up to Trump to decide what to do with the appeal.
Ah.
The problem
I
is,
see it.
because it's up for appeal, you can't just ignore it or decide, okay, I don't want to play anymore.
Yeah.
I don't think that's allowed.
I'll have to consider that.
Right? There's some something
Oops, I've lost your audio.
about the
There
Supreme.
you
You don't hear it?
are. I got you now. Okay.
So let me just try calling back. That worked yesterday.
Yeah, that's true. We can give that a shot. Why not? Get out of here, Static. Well, there it goes. Armando says he hears it. All right. I'm not crazy. All right.
Or-
Well, the static isn't an indication that I'm crazy, but I do hear it. Okay. Well, anyway, yeah, we got your audio anyhow, so we can finish up.
Okay. So if Congress won't appropriate the money, then the House and the Trump administration could try to settle it. And they may decide to drop the lawsuit. But now that the case is on appeal, Nicholas writes, it's not so easy because the Supreme Court has said that appeals courts can't overturn district court orders even when parties settle their case. even if both parties ask nicely.
Okay.
So you still have the injunction. And if you don't do anything about the injunction is always hanging there. And if the injunction is always hanging there, which could be instituted at any time, that makes insurance companies really skittish because they don't know what's going to happen. It's not settled.
Yeah.
So they won't want to participate in the exchanges. That's the problem.
Okay. That is complex. I'll have to digest that one.
So that's why I sent you that one. I just thought you and Armando might tackle that because I don't fully understand why the courts say that once you start this process, you have to finish it. And if you finish it, it may well be decided in the favor of the House because what Obama did might well be unconstitutional. And that means you can't make payments to the insurance companies, and that means they don't want to participate in the exchanges.
So,
but if you leave it and say, it's working okay, so just forget about it, the courts can't turn around and say, I get what you're trying to do politically because it's more convenient to ignore it, but now that you've started the process, we can't ignore it.
That seems like it's unusual.
Yes, and so that's why I'm bringing it to your attention.
Okay.
Don't fully understand it, but it looks like, I think that gets looked at on May 22nd or something around there, and that is the biggest thing hanging out there that might well affect how Obamacare works from this point onward, even more so than whatever Ryan is talking about.
Yeah, all right, well, we'll keep an eye on that one. We have first to get past government shutdown.
Yeah, we got a couple other things there, too, that he's responsible for. I did put a link to that, but let me just put it right at the bottom because it's easier to find.
Which one? The House v. Price one?
Yeah.
I've got that open. I found that one.
Oh, you do?
Yep.
Okay. Good.
Okay.
So that one's just worth pondering in detail because it really could be one of the bigger things that actually happens that isn't on everybody's radar. And our job is to bring people up to speed on stuff like that.
Yes. Find those radar items. Oh, I just heard of radar blip. I don't know. Let's go check out what that is. Okay.
Right. Okay, anyway, that's it for me today. I just thought that was some of the more interesting stuff that was out there.
Yes.
So thanks so much for having me on and indulging me.
Okay.
Oh, one more thing.
Yes.
And this is another Armando favorite. I'm just really trying to get him on, but I don't know how well it's working.
All right.
Sheldon Whitehouse was asked about what we should do about filibustering Neil Gorsuch for Supreme Court.
Yes.
Because if the Democrats filibuster him, and it looks like they have the votes to do it, what happens next and what does McConnell do?
Right.
So I don't know where this story is. I just have a clipping of it, so it didn't give it a source. But it says, asked about the possibility that the filibuster would be nuked, ripping it away from Democrats in future fights, Whitehouse chuckled. And he said, to my mind, there's no reason to lose a fight in order to save yourself for a later fight.
Aha.
You just face the same fight, plus you've already lost. What's the point?
That is true. That's good thinking. I recognize it.
Yeah. So, it's to me, I think that's fairly well said, and all of these concerned trolling advice about the Democrats shouldn't do this because they're going to ruin it for next time, kind of misses the point that you're going to lose this and then lose the next one. So what are you waiting for? Why are you holding it back? At least this way you make the point politically that what happened with Merrick Garland was unacceptable.
Yeah. That's likely true. I mean, if you lose the ability to filibuster now, and so then the next nominee is even worse than Gorsuch, I mean that's bad, but that was coming anyway. I mean, I assume
that was coming anyway. That's the point people seem to be missing
right.
here.
If
somehow, if
you
play nice, we'll go back to the old rules. That ain't happening.
Yeah, I mean, the nuclear option is there. It's always been there, and you can do these things. If we preserve the filibuster now and they bring us someone terrible, presumably we filibuster them and they nuke the filibuster then, and we still have the same two nominees.
My own personal rule is that you're not allowed to even discuss Neil Gorsuch's confirmation or filibuster without mentioning what happened to Merrick Garland. They are so inextricably entwined that it's only half the story and a misleading half the story.
Yes. Plus, they both
talk about the Democrats somehow breaking norms.
Yeah. Well, you never know where these things start, and it always pays to have context. But yeah, very often the media in rushes either to meet the deadline or make word counts don't always include that kind of context.
Well,
Luckily,
it's another one of our jobs to stick right there.
Sure.
So that really is
There goes that.
And I'll be back on Monday. And
all right. Thanks, Greg. Sorry about that audio. And sorry to everybody who was listening to the static on that. We'll try and work that one out for the podcast again. Yesterday, I just had to slice out an entire chunk of what was going on, and we'll probably likely do this again too. Yeah. One suggestion, by the way, I think Kate Sherrill is onto something here. I suspect that the cord on your headset is perhaps going bad. If that's something that unplugs on both ends, maybe it's an easy replacement. My son has that problem on his Beats headphones, and they're easy to replace. I don't know if it's so easy for you, but we'll take a look at the equipment and diagnose it over the weekend and try and get it straightened out and make some suggestions about how we can fix that up. I think that's probably it. That's the sort of thing that it often results in something like that. And it's not always detectable to the person it's happening to either. So we'll see if we can't replace it. Did you run over the cord at all? Do you have like a rolling office chair? That'll do it sometimes too. All right. Well, we'll fix that up and we'll fix this up for podcast. Armando hopping up and down somewhere. Free to join us too, by the way, if you wanted to speak your mind on some of this stuff. We enjoyed your comments behind the scenes, but most people didn't get a chance to see that. And you might as well come on and share it with us, provided your headset is working. And maybe you want to take a look at this thing here, the complications of House v. Price. And as a matter of fact, I know I have another legal story lurking somewhere in pocket. Let me see if I can bring that one up. Someone I think was writing again on the GSA's letter about the Trump Hotel. And maybe you wanted to dive into some of that. In the meantime, to bring you up to date on what other women are doing when they're not trying to have dinner alone with Mike Pence, Ivanka Trump. The Ivanka Trump story continues. We've escalated now. She's got her phone. She's got her portal car service. She got the office in the West Wing, but she kept insisting, I won't be taking an official job. And then they said, also, I won't be taking a salary. And then finally, it's gotten to the point where they said, all right, well, I will take an official job. And not only will I take an official job, I'm going to be assistant to the president, which is a extremely high-ranking job to take. I still think they're able to do this without paying her. The pay is the least of the concerns, I think, in all of this. I did have it pointed out. Yesterday, I was cracking a joke where I just saw that she was getting this official job too, and I was like, to hell with it. Why not? She's a 5-star general too. Give her a battalion, give her a nuclear weapons, whatever she may want, and let her go to town. And then I saw somebody say, oh, this is actually a rank that is, I don't know how you really make this equivalence, but I guess in security clearance, perhaps, equivalent to basically a 3-star general. And I'm not certain where that assertion came from, and it's kind of an awkward one to have to make, but I think I might have tracked it down to this article here. I saw somebody tweet it. I can't remember who. I didn't put it aside until I could try and verify it, but I did search through their timeline to see if there was an article they might have linked to. The only thing I could come up with is this piece here from Market Watch, from the Wall Street Journal. Ivanka Trump takes official unpaid position in the White House. First daughter had faced ethics questions over informal role. I guess one of the problems with the formal ethics rules in the White House and the federal government is it's not, I mean, it was never really kosher to give your daughter a job in the White House, plus your son-in-law, by the way. That's an additional little bit of weirdness there, that the whole family works with it. By the way, I assume at some point that Trump's sons will end up wanting this too. I don't know whether he's going to end up granting it to them or not, because they're supposed to be out there busy running the businesses so that he doesn't have to liquidate and divest entirely. I mean, he does have to, but he keeps insisting he doesn't, because the solution is he'll just let his sons run the business. Interesting, too, that it was originally supposed to be all of his kids, his adult kids, minus Tiffany, I guess, for whatever reason. And he clearly thinks Ivanka is the smartest of the bunch, because that's the one he's bringing into the White House. In the meantime, thank you very much. That little ping in the background is Greg telling me he ordered a new headset. Well, that's fine. That should be. Order yourself something nice. We'll make sure you have the best equipment and that it works well. That could be it. I mean, I don't know what else could be explaining it, but hopefully it didn't put you out too much. And maybe we can dip into the new Kagro in the Morning equipment fund too to make sure you have a good one. All right, Ivanka though clearly the smartest of the bunch. That's the one that he decided to bring with him into the White House. Which I don't know. Does that bode ill for the Trump organization? Probably not. They've had an incompetent running the place the whole time, and despite it all, bankruptcies and everything, it still exists. He's managed to keep it, taped together somehow, duct taped together. But I don't know. I guess it's always subject to collapse. But I guess the ethics watchdogs at some point said it troubling enough that you're giving her a position of responsibility, but yeah, the idea that that she'll just sort of be generally important isn't really going to cut it. You're going to have to assign her some kind of a job in order to justify all the rest of this crap that you're giving her. Security clearance, secure phone, the West Wing office, the portal-to-portal car service, the Secret Service protection. Why? There has to be a reason for all of this stuff. Okay, fine. We'll make a job up for her. Rebecca Ballhaus is the reporter over at Market Watch who has this piece. Just noting, Ivanka has taken a role as an official, though unpaid employee of her father's administration after her plan to serve as an informal advisor drew criticism from ethics experts and Democratic lawmakers. She'll now serve as assistant to President Donald Trump, according to White House officials. She already has an office in the West Wing and has been seeking security clearance. She doesn't have to seek it, by the way. She can just have it. The president can say, boom, you've got it. But I guess they thought it would be wise for her to try initially to go through regular channels. I don't know whether that's a good idea. She might not make it all the way through. I mean, if you're honest. But for some reason they decided it was best to go that direction. Probably they're hoping if she hits a wall, they'll just grant her the security clearance, and we hope nobody writes a story about that, or if they do, nobody remembers it. The official role will strengthen the ethics requirements for Trump, that's an awkward way of putting it, who had previously said she would follow the rules for government employees but was under no legal requirement to do so. I guess now that she's a federal government employee, even if she's not taking a salary, she too will be required to recuse herself from matters that affect financial interests and to divest from assets that could be affected by their work. Trump, meaning Ivanka, will now also be required to file a personal financial disclosure that will be made public. And I did hear something about that just the other day, but I guess her lawyers say that's on the way, and I understood from a tweet that I saw go by yesterday that her lawyer what's her last? How do you pronounce it? Is it Gorelick? Jamie Gorelick? Is that how it's pronounced? Big time Democrat and official from the Justice Department under the Obama administration. Now in private practice, you end up occasionally with private clients, the likes of which may sometimes be an Ivanka Trump, surely taken on before Trump's his official, real, honest-to-God entry into the 2016 race, and probably a lucrative client, and the partnership said, no, you can't jettison her, and no, you can't recuse yourself from that client either, so whatever. I don't know. I saw that and I was just like, oh man, come on, jeez, really, seriously? You couldn't find another partner, and you probably didn't want another partner to take it either. I'm sure it's very lucrative. So now she's going to be filing her personal financial disclosure, and I'm sure when there's a gigantic hole in it that's discovered and everybody says, look, she's hiding XYZ, everyone will say, well, her lawyer did it, and her lawyer is a big Democrat. So it's really basically still Bill Clinton's fault / Barack Obama / whoever comes next. We'll blame it on all of them. It's Franklin Roosevelt's fault, honestly. What else have we got here? Anything else we can pick up on this? Trump, who has thus far played a more prominent role in the administration than adult children of past presidents. And again, I guess throughout this story, Trump is shorthand for Ivanka Trump. You got to be careful with these things. She has already extricated herself from her management roles at the companies owned by her family. Really? As her husband, Jared Kushner, has been serving as a senior advisor to the president since the start of the administration. Kushner isn't paid in that role. And that's really about it. Although an expanded version of this report does appear in wallstreetjournal.com, I just don't subscribe there, so I won't see it, and I believe that we got all we needed to get out of that. Just sort of the hint that it was somehow putting her on more solid ethical grounds, or rather, I guess what it really is putting the government and people who have an interest in good government on more solid ground to insist that she make financial disclosures, and it will matter now whether she does it correctly or not. It'll matter in the sense that we'll all be angry about it, and they'll continue to do it improperly and get away with it, but that's what will matter. Okay, so let's see. We have that news. What else have we here? You know what? Let's move on to a couple of other bits here. I guess we'll skip around a little bit. It'll be a little bit of a hodgepodge. There's a piece in BuzzFeed, which is probably a good idea to bring you up to speed. Although, again, if you are a regular Kagro in the Morning listener, you are up to speed on something that is a key element of this BuzzFeed piece entitled, "Here's Why Republicans Are Confident Neil Gorsuch Will Be on the Supreme Court." You already know this because we've brought it up and discussed it, I believe, on the show in the past. Remember the Heritage Foundation's outline for how they could get Gorsuch onto the Supreme Court over the objections as manifested by a Democratic filibuster without necessarily using the nuclear option. There's the option of using the existing rules to enforce the two-speech rule. Well, we'll get to it. And if it doesn't ring a bell, the BuzzFeed folks do a pretty good job in summarizing it. Chris Geidner, Sarah Mims, and Zoe Tillman. Oh, I'm sorry, and another, Tarini Party, if I'm pronouncing it correctly. It's P-A-R-T-I, Party, hooray, who have put this piece together. Why would Republicans be so confident? Here's the answer. Senate Republicans say Neil Gorsuch will be confirmed to the Supreme Court by next Friday. That I'm not so sure about. Despite strong opposition from Democrats who are threatening to filibuster, each party faces a big challenge next week, but Republicans have the upper hand. If they're out there saying that it'll be done by next Friday, that should be taken as a strong hint that the nuclear option is what they have in mind. There's no other way to get it done by next Friday absent a deal with Democrats or, I don't know, disappearance of the Democrats from the Senate in one way or another. So here's their piece. It's pretty, it rounds things up pretty nicely. At 10 a.m. next Monday, the Senate Judiciary Committee is slated to consider the nomination of Neil Gorsuch for the vacancy on the U.S. Supreme Court. By the end of next week, President Donald Trump's pick will be confirmed as the next justice of the Supreme Court, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell told reporters Tuesday. How and whether the nomination will get from point A to point B, however, is up for debate, given that the top Democrat in the Senate, Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, has already said that Democrats will try to filibuster the nomination. Without the needed bipartisan support, Republicans could invoke the so-called nuclear option in response, a move to allow Gorsuch's confirmation on a simple majority vote by bypassing Democrats altogether, but that's not their only option. So what's going to happen? They say on April 3rd, the Judiciary Committee, controlled 11-9 by Republicans, will vote Gorsuch's nomination out of committee with a favorable recommendation. Although Democrats could boycott a committee vote, as they have on some of President Trump's cabinet nominees this year, Republicans have effectively shut down those attempts, with the committees allowing votes to proceed regardless of Democrats' attendance, and could do so again. What's more, Democrats have not suggested they plan to take that path here. What I will add to that pretty good, pretty comprehensive, quickie picture is that, yes, Democrats could boycott a committee vote. They have done that in committees before, and Republicans, it should be noted, have used basically a committee-level version of the nuclear option to change the rules in those committees, which had previously required that there be at least one member, and in some cases two members, of the minority present in order to conduct any business. They got rid of that rule and went ahead and conducted their business without Democrats present in at least two committees to deal specifically with cabinet nominations. So they've been nuking things already, so I guess it's a pretty good indication that they might be willing to do it on the Senate floor as well. Maybe, maybe not. We'll see. It should also be noted that Pat Leahy, who continues to insist that he's, at least as of yesterday, was continuing to insist that he was at least generally opposed in principle to filibustering the Gorsuch nomination. It should be. We should all remind ourselves that when Leahy was chair of the Judiciary Committee, he was fastidious about sticking to the standing rules of the committee, even after one of the partisan switches in control of the Senate floor changed control of the committee briefly to Orrin Hatch. When Orrin Hatch chaired the Judiciary Committee, he changed the application of, for instance, the blue slip rule, where you had to used to have to get the blue slip of both home state senators for any judge to move forward in the nominating process. That used to be the standard. If both senators from the home state of that judge, the judge in question, didn't return the blue slip and say, I have no, personal or political objection to moving forward with this nomination, then it didn't happen. And that allowed Republicans to simply refuse to return blue slips for anybody nominated by the other party, essentially. And they began doing that pretty regularly, and that created a huge problem when Pat Leahy was chair, because he refused to change that rule. And then there was a change in partisan control of the Senate. Orrin Hatch took over as chair, and Democrats said, well, then we'll just do the same thing to you. And they began to do that, and Orrin Hatch said, no, while I'm chairman of this committee, you'll only need one blue slip. And it just worked that way. And now when Pat Leahy said, that's wrong, that's terrible, and he was right. Now, at that point, he was probably okay in saying so. But he said, when we go back to Democratic control of the Judiciary Committee, we're going to reinstate it the old way. You're going to need the two blue slips. And they did that, and it once again became a problem. And there were a lot of eyes on Leahy at that point, giving him the senatorial side eye, I guess you could say. I understand the interest in traveling the high road, but we really are making problems for ourselves here that we're not going to get out of anytime soon. They did not learn any lesson about anything from your treating them with respect and dignity and kid gloves and you sticking to principle and all that stuff. It's all very nice, very well and good. I'm sure you're beloved in Vermont for it, but honestly, you could probably change your mind and still make it back here. But okay, fine, whatever. Let's all screw ourselves in and never punish Republicans. It's been a great theory, and it's worked so well to this point, and now we're right back where we started from, and the Senate Judiciary Committee, back in Republican hands, will simply nuclear option its own rules and say that a boycott of the committee by Democrats doesn't matter, and we'll move the nomination forward anyway. And it's probably, why they're probably not boycotting? Because Pat Leahy is, I don't know, I'm guessing, but I wouldn't be surprised if Pat Leahy was telling Judiciary Committee Democrats, if we boycott, they're just going to change the rules as they did with these other committees. You saw that, and we have to protect the integrity of Senate Judiciary Committee rules. We don't want them screwing around with them the way they are in other committees, because when we take it back, we're going to go the high road again and bring back the old rules, although the likelihood of it happening under Pat Leahy as chairman again, I guess, is pretty remote, I would say. But I don't know. I guess if there's a magic flip during his next term, or, I guess he thinks he's in good health and might run for yet another. I don't really know what his status is for re-election. I haven't been following it that closely. It's not a highly contested race usually. So anyway, he's basically probably telling people that we need to do what we can, essentially an analog to the thinking that Sheldon Whitehouse rejected that Greg told us about dealing with the filibuster. It hasn't been a tremendously successful strategy in preserving the bipartisan and cooperative nature of the Senate Judiciary Committee. That has been gone for years, but Leahy doesn't believe in it. Anyway, so that might be happening. Next up, they say under the what's going to happen section here, likely Monday night, but almost definitely by Tuesday morning, McConnell would then place the nomination on the executive calendar, which means debate on the nomination can begin on the Senate floor. Beyond that, what happens could get complicated. The next likely move for McConnell would be to file a cloture petition, a move to limit the debate on the issue. The move effectively requires Democrats to get enough support to shut Gorsuch down or allow a vote to get him through. Simple enough, you understand that, of course. Under Senate rules, the cloture vote comes 2 days, more or less, after the filing of a cloture petition. If cloture is invoked, which requires 60 votes, the debate is limited and Gorsuch's nomination would be voted on after 30 hours of additional debate. McConnell said Tuesday there would be an opportunity, as he put it, for Democrats to help provide the needed votes to invoke cloture. Because there are only 52 Republicans in the Senate, it would take the support of at least 8 Democrats to invoke cloture and allow a final vote. Given Schumer's position on the issue, the reverse question, can Democrats stop cloture from being invoked, will be the first real challenge of the week. Democrats, who have 48 votes in the Senate, including 2 independents, will need to vote together to sustain the filibuster and delay the nomination. Republicans currently need 7 more Democrats to join them in moving the nomination forward because as of now, Senator Joe Manchin of West Virginia is the only Democrat who has said he will not support a filibuster and will vote with Republicans for cloture. What happens if the Democrats have the votes to sustain a filibuster? If they do, or if the Democrats pull off what McConnell is terming, quote, the first partisan filibuster, unquote, of a Supreme Court nominee, that is some dodgy language, of course. If they are able to pull this off, as McConnell's team has been preemptively accusing the Democrats of doing, and by the way, it's not a partisan filibuster. Joe Manchin, who's a Democrat, votes against cloture. Therefore, you have bipartisan support for cloture, and I don't know what you're talking about. Why not pull that trick out of your hat? What can he do about it? Well, he can keep bringing Gorsuch's nomination up for successive cloture votes over and over. That's true. McConnell did just that in 2015 with a human trafficking bill that included a major anti-abortion provision. Unless there's a reason to think that the vote count would change, however, the aim this time around, putting Gorsuch on the court, makes this move less than optimal. If not that, the next and most discussed possibility is the so-called nuclear option, which would essentially make Democratic opposition null and void while leading to bigger consequences for both parties moving forward. In 2013, the Democrats, under then Majority Leader Harry Reid's leadership, invoked the nuclear option for lower court nominees and other presidential nominees, but Reid specifically left out nominees for the Supreme Court. Essentially, that means the Senate got rid of the 60-vote threshold for cloture on those nominees and made it a simple majority. The move at the time was an effort to push through several Obama nominees to federal appeals courts. The move this time, which would also need to be approved by a simple majority of the Senate, is to apply the same ruling for purposes of Supreme Court nominations as well. If successful, Republicans would then have enough votes on their own to confirm Gorsuch. A majority vote to change the rule, however, could be tough for Republicans, setting up the second real challenge of the week. Republicans can lose only 2 votes, which would lead to a 50-50 tie, which could then be broken by Vice President Mike Pence on a measure that many Republicans have previously expressed opposition to, and that some, like Senator Bob Corker, are now even openly expressing concern about. Why? Because the change in the rules could make it easy to get Gorsuch on the bench. It would also mean that the next time Democrats control both the Senate and the White House, the same rules would apply to them. Schumer has repeatedly said this year that he regrets Democrats' decisions under Reid to change the rules for lower court and cabinet nominees because they could have rejected more of Trump's cabinet picks if they still had the 60-vote threshold. But guess what? They just would have done it. So there you go. I mean, it's an interesting comment to make, but it's actually pretty detrimental. No reason in the world for you to have said you regret it unless you thought that maybe magically saying that would convince people like Bob Corker to say maybe I ought not to do it too. But I think most senators, believe it or not, even Republicans, probably smarter than that. Maybe he thought it was a good PR move. Gee whiz, I regret it. I don't know. But guess what? They invented the nuclear option and they would have used it. They tried to use it in 2005. They fell short. It's not a secret. Everyone knows it's out there. And if you had actually successfully blocked Trump's cabinet for any length of time, you would have found that filibuster nuked pretty quickly. Why? I'm not really sure. He's not using his cabinet members for anything, but instead of being the, quote, first partisan filibuster of a Supreme Court nominee, instead you would have an unprecedented partisan filibuster of the president's cabinet. And after all, they're entitled to their nominees and blah, blah, blah. So that would have been gone probably within 2 weeks. So I don't know how much that statement is worth from Schumer. Here's the thing, though. That's not McConnell's only option. There are at least two other technically possible moves, and here they are described. If McConnell, who is widely regarded as an institutionalist and master of arcane Senate rules, knows that the votes are not there to invoke cloture, or even if a first cloture vote fails, he could also use a procedure that's been openly pushed by the Heritage Foundation, a conservative outside group, since January. In their terms, it's a, quote, a rules-based strategy for overcoming minority obstruction of a Supreme Court nomination. That's the title of their article on it. This would be the use of the technically there but apparently never invoked two-speech rule. Under the rule, senators are limited to giving two speeches during the course of one legislative day. The rule then could be used to eventually end debate on the Gorsuch nomination, even without invoking cloture. In other words, Republicans could use it to exhaust Democrats and approve of Gorsuch without their votes, bypassing them entirely. The thing with a legislative day is that it is not necessarily a day. It could go on for a very long time, so long as the Senate never adjourns for the night. The Senate can, with a simple majority vote, call several days, weeks, or even months the same legislative day, thereby only allowing Democrats to give two speeches each. And any motion, in this case by Democrats, to end the legislative day can be defeated by a mere majority of senators present. Notably, the Heritage Foundation was re-promoting this January report earlier this week. As Democrats' talk of filibuster has increased, the Heritage Foundation and the Federalists' Sean Davis have been promoting this strategy. Heritage and the unassociated conservative lawyers group, the Federalist Society, have been credited with influencing Trump's thinking about the Supreme Court. Wow, that's huge credit. This procedural move, though, has several downsides for Republicans, as a leadership aide who told BuzzFeed News he was providing a reality check on the idea made clear. And, I agree in the analysis on this, too. This is, let's go through it. If Democrats are willing to go to the wall, the metaphorical wall, they could take up significant time in delaying Gorsuch's nomination and holding up the Senate from getting to other business. There is no limit on the length of their speeches as long as they do not yield the floor, sit down, or stop speaking. Think Mr. Smith Goes to Washington dozens of times over, times two. It would give the Democrats a ton of media coverage and could prevent the Senate from doing anything else for as long as the effort continues. What's more, when the two speeches per Democratic senator... Oh, you know what? Let me save this bit, just because it's interesting. I'll point out at this point. So what that means is if you had 48 Democratic senators interested in participating. And I guess you don't have Manchin, although I guess it's possible that he might at some point come around, depending on how things are running. But even if you have the 48, well, I did the calculations with the 48. I mean, they're approximate calculations because you got to ask yourself, how long can a senator go? We've seen a couple of sort of faux filibusters in the past from a few senators, and they've managed occasionally to speak for a good 10, 12 hours. Not everybody's going to be capable of doing that, even if they are just reading the phone book. It's physically taxing. But you could most senators are probably in reasonably good health and could probably manage 6 hours. If every Democratic senator and independent who caucuses with Democrats participated and gave their 2 speeches and went for 6 hours each time, and they can make a schedule. I mean, you can make a 6-hour speech that'll wipe you out. You get 2 weeks off, and then you come back and do it again. 48 senators giving 6-hour speeches twice around the clock, if the Senate really does never adjourn for the evening, running the Senate 24/7, that consumes 24 entire calendar days. That's not a whole lot. We can't make it all the way to the end of the Trump administration this way. But it does mean that there's literally almost a month of floor time consumed, and more if you can get more time out of the senators each time they go. I mean, if they really push it to the limit, who knows how long they can go. If you double it, well, I guess the answer would be, if you double it and each time they make 12-hour speeches, that's an awful lot to ask of people, especially to do twice inside of a limited time window. Well, the mathematics of it is that's 48 calendar days. That's a whole hell of a lot. Now you're approaching a month and a half there. And again, although eventually you run out of time, that's a month to a month and a half that you cannot do anything else in the Senate. No other business can come to the floor and be worked out. It's not like the old 2-track filibuster. This is an actual talking filibuster. You'd have to be working on nothing but this for all of this time. And that means, by the way, well, for one thing, if you're thinking of confirming Gorsuch to the court by the end of next week, this isn't what you have in mind. It just can't be. It also means, by the way, that if you're thinking of taking the nomination to the floor next week, the Democratic strategy, even if they speak for only 6 hours each time, the Democrats can keep the Senate on the subject of the Gorsuch nomination straight into the government shutdown that Joan has been warning us about for some time. That deadline comes around, April 28th or so? If they report out the nomination on April 3rd or April 4th and then bring it up by the end of the week, midweek, end of the week, April 5th, you're talking about even a pretty limited filibuster effort taking you all the way to the end of the current continuing resolution without any work having been done on the Senate floor on it. Of course, you could be doing some work on the side and in committee and behind closed doors elsewhere, but this would be a very sensitive touch-and-go situation on the floor, and you can at any time call everybody back to the floor for quorum calls and motions to adjourn and all sorts of things. There are all sorts of procedural motions you can make in the middle of all of these speeches and in between them all, and it would really be a huge tax on the ability of the Senate to do their work. Not only would no other legislation or other measures be able to come to the floor, but all those senators, 100 of them, will have to be sleeping in their offices for a month. They are not going to like that. That's why it's rarely used. The cost of keeping the Senate on any one measure for a month plus, to the total exclusion of everything else, and the total inability to adjourn or even leave for a meal at any point for a month, means it's just very, very rarely used. And now, a little bit more from this section, which I also think is very interesting. So we know what the rule is. You can only give those 2 speeches, and they're pretty strict about what constitutes a speech. If you speak for 5 minutes, you've wasted it. If you speak for 1 minute, if you address anything whatsoever to do with the substance of the bill, or even in some cases make parliamentary inquiries, they can sometimes term that to be one of your 2 speeches. But here's where it really gets interesting. If everybody does really well, right, and is very disciplined and gives these long speeches, the rule says you can only give 2. But as we know, rules aren't self-executing. They have to be, enforced and executed by the body itself. So the 2 speeches that everybody gets to give, especially if everybody's going for 6+ hours, would give you a ton of media coverage, although eventually they'd get bored. But what's more, when the 2 speeches per Democratic senator are done, a senator could, this is great to have in your reporting. I like that they went and stretched on this one. A senator could try to give a 3rd speech. Now, that speech would almost certainly be ruled out of order, but that would only mean that senators would have to vote against a senator speaking. As they say here, think the drama over shutting down Senator Elizabeth Warren, but after days or weeks of Democratic speechifying on the nomination. What's more, multiple Democrats could try to speak a 3rd time, requiring a vote each time against each senator speaking. So, sometimes these votes on simply enforcing the rules, which are black and white, everyone can see you're only supposed to give 2 speeches. Yeah? Well, suppose I want to try to give a 3rd. Well, we won't let you. Okay, well, how will you not let me? Well, we'll vote to, make you sit down. All right, do it 48 times. Do it 100 times. Do it 1,000 times. I mean, there's no limit to that either. Eventually they can just say, all right, we're just going to rule from the chair that the motions, are dilatory, and we'll just stop recognizing senators who are Democrats who have made 2 speeches. We just won't recognize them. But if they're willing to stand there on C-SPAN 2, and if it's the right time of day, and make a stink about it, well, it could become very interesting. Plus, of course, making motions to adjourn, live quorum calls, forcing all the Republicans to come back to the floor and cast their votes and be counted so that the Senate doesn't automatically adjourn, which would be the case if they can't produce a quorum. Just the procedural wrangling alone can add a couple of days to this thing if they're really dedicated to the process. I don't know if they will be, but they could be. Members of both parties will have to be constantly on call, BuzzFeed continues, quite correct, on days, nights, and weekends to stop the other party from either sneaking Gorsuch through with a final confirmation vote or shutting down his nomination and starting the whole process over by adjourning and ending the legislative day. Ultimately, when all Democrats who are interested in forcing the issue have had their 2 speeches, they essentially would then be out of options. McConnell could bring up Gorsuch for a clean, simple majority vote and send him to the Supreme Court at the cost of doing anything else for the entire time. No continuing resolution, no budget for fiscal year 2018, no more Congressional Review Act work, no more attempts at overhauling health care, no more attempts at, or no attempts at all to begin with, at overhauling the tax system, at least not for over a month and a half. And then all of that has to take place in the context of, if the filibuster goes well and there's strong public support for fighting back, it takes place in that context. Of course, should they win the public relations battle, things might be considerably more rosy for them, but they have to prove that they can do that. Speaking of recess, we finally turn to an old Washington frenemy, the recess appointment. If it looks like Democrats are able to sustain a filibuster, and if McConnell thinks invoking the 2-speech rule would not be a workable solution, there's at least one last possibility. The Senate could leave town. If the Senate recesses as planned at the end of the day on April 7th, it is not due to return until April 24th. Which is also, by the way, all by itself a pretty significant problem for a continuing resolution, isn't it? During that time, Trump could give a recess appointment to Gorsuch, putting him on the Supreme Court through the end of the next session of Congress, which would last until late 2018 or very early 2019. While the Supreme Court ruled against some of President Obama's recess appointments, Current precedent suggests that if the Senate is absent for 10 or more days, a recess appointment likely would be allowed. The upcoming April recess gives Trump that time. As with the two-speech rule option, however, the leadership aide made clear that challenges make this option relatively unappealing as well. Primarily, a recess appointment is not a solution to the vacancy. It is, by definition, temporary. Additionally, there are ways that the Democrats could challenge Republican efforts to recess if they know Trump plans to put Gorsuch on the high court through a recess appointment. While Republicans have the votes to go into recess and let Trump put Gorsuch on the bench on his own, Democrats could, for example, require the reading of the journal, a move that would potentially take hours of time as a clerk reads every small detail of the minutes of the Senate's past day, including the full text of any bills introduced for consideration. Finally, as Justice Antonin Scalia himself noted in the court's opinion regarding Obama's recess appointments, there could, of course, be legal challenges. And there should be a legal challenge, too, by the way. As they hinted at up top here, it says primarily a recess appointment is not a solution to the vacancy because it is, by definition, temporary. I have pretty serious legal objections to the idea of making a temporary nomination for a lifetime appointment. That seems to me to be sort of inherently contradictory. The idea of the lifetime appointment being that the person appointed to the court, as much of a joke as this is in the current partisan era, the idea is supposed to be that the person appointed to the federal bench is there for life, and that makes them independent, and that is to say, having no particular interest necessarily in continuing to curry favor with the administration that appointed them or any future administration. The job is theirs, and they can't be removed except by impeachment. And that's supposed to mean, that they don't have to worry about staying on the good side of the current administration or the administration during which their appointment might otherwise expire. That's not the case for recess appointments, and you'd have a sitting Supreme Court justice who knows that his term would expire while Donald Trump was still president, barring any unforeseen circumstances of any kind, and that when that term came to a conclusion, if they weren't still in the good graces of whoever occupied the White House at that time, they might not be renominated. And so that will color the decision-making that they render on the bench. I mean, that likely would have been colored that way anyway in this partisan era, but that's the thinking anyhow. So that would, I think, be subject to a pretty serious constitutional challenge. All of that leaves us where? In short, the leaders of both parties in the Senate face a big challenge next week, and all eyes will be on what happens with each hurdle. The bottom line is that the procedure and rules are stacked heavily in Republicans' favor, and it is likely a matter of when, not if, Gorsuch is serving on the Supreme Court. We'll see. Let's see. What else is this? There's a correction here. A story at the Federalist advanced the two-speech rule option, and the Federalist Society has been credited with influencing President Trump's Supreme Court thinking. This article initially incorrectly conflated the unrelated publication and organization. Okay. I don't know that made any huge difference in the way I absorbed what that article had to say. But very interesting. Yes, the procedure can work. No, they never use it. And the reason is because it's just too damn costly. On the other hand, this Senate has less on its agenda than hardly any other in history. So it doesn't necessarily mean that it hurts them to sit by and waste a month plus on the Gorsuch fight. But clearly, if they were planning on doing that, they wouldn't be talking about having Gorsuch confirmed to the Supreme Court by week's end. I don't know whether they really mean that. I wonder whether that's... my guess is that would be McConnell trying to find a way to hint at their readiness to use the nuclear option without actually saying so. And it's the sort of thing that they can, of course, back off from pretty easily and just blame Democrats for it. They probably also think they might perhaps win the messaging war of a protracted filibuster against Gorsuch, and I guess anything's possible. We'll have to see. All right, Armando, if you're still listening and around, I know you messaged that you may be interested in talking about this crazy Devin Nunes thing, and certainly welcome to come on and discuss that, or anything else for that matter. We have at least two other items of some interest to you, I know. You also noted that you had some thoughts on the Gorsuch thing. Welcome to come on if you happen to have the time. Maybe I should type you a note in case you've walked away. All right, you heard me. There you go. We'll go with the verbal warning that I gave you. Hey, Armando, how you doing?
Hey, David. How are you?
I don't know. Nothing's happening.
I hope you're not going to lunch with any woman.
Not if
who's not your wife.
Yeah, not in these short shorts I'm wearing. I'll tell you that. All right, I'm not, but it's a fun thought. There's been we spent a little bit of time on just sort of outlining the various options for Republicans on Gorsuch. I assume that certainly their position to this point is we're going to use the nuclear option. That's how we're going to get it done by the end of next week. Don't know that they really have those votes.
That's what they should say from a negotiating perspective.
Right.
And, you look at it, I just tweeted out, you might have seen it. I don't know how to get it to you. I guess I could DM it to you. McCaskill warning Democrats about the pitfalls of, actually, let me just DM it to you so you can see it.
Sure.
And, I'm not someone who's going to blast McCaskill here. I understand the politics for her of this. I think she's going to vote for Gorsuch, or at the very least, she's going to vote against cloture. And she's trying to put a face on it for more mainstream and maybe some progressive Democrats to give her a pass on it.
I see.
Because she's saying, no, it's better for all of us if we let them go, because, what happens, if you look at the article I just sent you, she sort of says, well, okay, let's assume we stop them. Well, then they'll send someone else up who's worse.
Yes.
Now, there's a real problem with that argument. First of all, Gorsuch is incredibly bad. There's not going to be too many that are going to be worse. And I mean in the sense of the ideology. Now, some people like to focus on the Supreme Court as well. Is he really qualified? He's a brilliant mind. They'll have great discussions on the court. One of those West Wing ideas of, there's this high-minded, big intellectual debate going on in the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
Which is nonsense. It's votes. Brennan always understood it. I can count to 5. That's what it is. It's just another political institution. And to pretend that there's some persuasion going on in the court outside the context of the personal politics of the members of the court, I think, is absurd. But I understand what she's doing. And my basic argument, and I don't know if you've ever weighed in on this, and the argument that McCaskill will make and that Beltway pundits will make is, well, this is the Scalia seat. Save it for a liberal seat.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And I just don't buy that, because they'll nuke then.
Yes. That's what Sheldon Whitehouse was pointing out, and I think it's largely correct. There's no reason to believe that it won't just eventually get to that. And letting Gorsuch go, I understand the initial thought, but I just can't believe that anybody would think that on the next nomination you would say, what does McCaskill envision happening here? Well, this is what I was talking about. I'm so glad we preserved the filibuster because now I'm going to use it. At which point they'd say, okay, well, now we're going to get rid of it. And then what does she say? Well, don't you remember the opinion piece that I wrote months ago?
Yeah, well, who was that? I think it was Coons of Delaware who said, well, we can make a deal with McConnell that if we don't filibuster now, he won't nuke the next one.
You can.
There's no binding rule to that effect.
No.
And my God, McConnell will contradict himself in 5 minutes on anything. We've seen it.
And it doesn't even need to be him. I mean, I've seen McConnell make deals in good faith, or what I believe might even be actual good faith on his part, only to have the rug pulled out from underneath him because Ted Cruz didn't say, I don't care what McConnell promised you.
Exactly. I mean, it's silly. Now, in terms of the optics and the politics of it, I actually think, and I've made this argument in Twitter, that this is actually the most opportune time to filibuster from the Democrats' perspective. First, the media is so distracted by Trump's shenanigans, from Russia to his crazy tweeting to everything else. You know, he's got a 35% approval rating. All that stuff means that, you know, the tut-tutting won't be that pronounced. Yeah, they'll tut-tut for about the Morning Joe show, they'll devote 5% of their show to tut-tutting. And then they'll devote 95% of the show to all the other stuff they talk about. It's not a huge focus. And it started with, I think ironically, opening the Gorsuch hearings the same day Comey testified at the House Intelligence Committee. The whole dog and pony show of the introductions, and he's a wonderful man, and look at his wonderful family, the all shucks nonsense. That never got any play. That entire day, if you recall, was all the House Intelligence Committee hearings. It was televised. I don't think there was barely any coverage of Gorsuch's hearing, and even in the subsequent days, it was, you know, an afterthought because Comey had just announced there is an FBI investigation into coordination between the Trump campaign and Russia. It just didn't register. So that bad moment sort of was bad. You know, yeah, they were, of course, Gorsuch is making it very hard on Democrats to say he's unacceptable. Well, that's fine. You said that and nobody cared. And tomorrow, nobody cares. And that moment sort of passed. You maybe it's because I was less engaged with it. But, excuse me. But if I'm not engaged in a Supreme Court hearing, I can't imagine the average American is. You know what I mean? I'm pretty obsessive on those things, and it wasn't something I paid a great deal of attention to. So I find it hard to believe that that the American people even have thought about Gorsuch one way or the other. They did some polling, and the Republicans, yes, these should be confirmed, and Democrats, no, and independents, who knows. But that's one of the things that if you make someone have an opinion on it, they'll have an opinion. If you ask the question, yes or no, should he or shouldn't he? But I think if you said, I don't care as one of the options, that would have gotten 70 or 80% of the vote, actually. And I say that, unfortunately, to include Democrats. So I just don't think it's the moment. And process-wise, finally, for why this is a good moment, we're very close to the point where Garland was denied a vote. Now, that actually speaks to potentially that having been a tactical mistake by the Republicans, because I think they thought it would be an election year issue, and they didn't want to have voted against him, I guess, is the argument, which didn't make much sense to me. I think not giving him a vote is what justifies a filibuster. Yeah. Here, I mean, in terms of optics. But at the end of the day, it's all going to be, hardball politics. They're going to nuke, I believe, and they'll whip the vote. It's going to be hard for a Republican senator not to nuke, it seems to me. And that'll be that. Now, that's what, they can pick up red state Dem votes, and maybe there will be some type of fix where he gets to 50 or 51 because, well, Manchin's definitely going to vote for him. I don't know if a Heitkamp and a couple of others will vote to confirm him. But to get to that, they still need to filibuster. And I don't know if a guy like Leahy can round up some more people to keep that number under 41. I actually think it's a tough spot for non-red state Democrats. If you're a blue state Democrat, I think you're pretty much going to have to vote to filibuster. I think that's the
so.
norm. That's the mean now for the blue state Democratic senator. Feinstein could go off the reservation because she's Feinstein, but not too many others.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Well, yeah, I think so, and I think you're beginning to see those names come in and fall exactly where you expect it to be, and people are calling offices just as they were for healthcare and every other big issue, and this happens all the time on the Supreme Court, and say, yeah, we expect a filibuster for this.
I don't know if you discussed it, but I last week I believe Bill Nelson
Yes.
announced he's going to filibuster. Now, I know Florida politics, and maybe a lot of people aren't that familiar with Bill Nelson, but Bill Nelson is the prototypical centrist Dem.
Yeah.
Voted for Roberts. Voted for Alito. And now he's filibustering Gorsuch. And it's interesting because he doesn't use Garland as his justification. He uses that truck driver story.
Uh-huh.
I mean, I think that's actually the headline with Gorsuch that's been pretty effective is, at least in Democratic circles, everybody knows the truck driver story. So, well, no, you should have stayed in your cab in whatever the thing is called, where the front of the truck.
Yeah.
I'm not going to pretend to be in tune with white working class voters and know what that's called, but I think it's a cab, but I'm not going to pretend that I know. That people know that story. So that's what he used. He thought that was the better politics of it. But of course, his big concern was not being someone who enabled the seating of Gorsuch. And he's going up against Rick Scott next year in re-election. Now, Trump did win Florida by about 1% in 2016. But, I think Nelson's calculation is right. He's more worried about losing enthusiasm from Democratic voters than he is about, oh, well, you blocked Gorsuch, so I'm definitely coming out to vote against you. I think Nelson's calculation is correct on that. I can't speak for McCaskill. She knows her state better than I do, obviously. And, Manchin's Manchin. He's good. He may, on the merits, agree with Gorsuch for all I know. But I think the politics are fairly clear for him. There's no way he's not voting for that he's not voting to let the Gorsuch nomination go to the floor, and I personally think he'll vote to confirm it. But all we need is 41. But of course, I just think it's not even much of a question that they will nuke. What do you think? Do you think there's some question about them nuking?
Well, some. I mean, if only because there's so many of them have been on the record insisting that was something they opposed as a matter of principle. But but
they're gonna nuke more in sorrow than anger.
Yeah, that's true, and that'll pretty much take care of it. To be honest, these guys flip all the time. So my guess is that there's a pretty good chance, and I'm not optimistic that it would be great if it fell apart just because from a partisan point of view, but I'm not terribly worried about it one way or the other. The filibuster is doomed eventually.
Well, here's the argument. Let's say by some miracle they don't nuke and we kill Gorsuch and Trump sends up another one.
Yeah.
And we do it again. I mean, second time they'll probably nuke, right? And they will, particularly since, it's a very rough map. It's almost politically impossible that the Democrats could regain the Senate. But again, if we're just going to take the chance, this is the upside. Okay, we block them all till the 2018 election. We get control of the Senate, and that's it. We block them until the next presidential election. Now, you're saying, well, that's outrageous and unprecedented. I guarantee you, and this is the Calvin Ball aspect of it that I don't understand Democratic thinking. Hillary Clinton wins the presidency. And the Republicans somehow maintain the Senate, which they wouldn't have if she had won, most likely. But just give you my hypothetical. They would have blocked until They couldn't. And as long as they had 50 votes or 51 votes or enough votes against any nominee, then they would have done it. Now, just to give you a scenario, Hillary Clinton loses popular vote, is accused of colluding with Russia. What are the chances that any Republican would have said, okay, sure, pick the next Supreme Court vacancy? Not a chance in hell. And that, even in this type of thing, Democrats just aren't like the Republicans. Again, I've always said you flip the scenario, we would be in a constitutional crisis now if how Trump won was how a Democrat had won.
Yes.
The country would be at a standstill.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you know what? The media would have gone along with it and said, no, they're right. They've got a point. There's a real cloud over everything. So I'm not sure how we can be going through anything until an investigation is finished. There would be an independent counsel. There would be a select commission. There would be, it would be absolutely incredible. Now, the chaos that we have in most respects is self-inflicted by Trump. Yeah, there are these issues on Russia. But I think, the media would have had it as one of 3 or 4 stories that they're covering as a major piece.
Yeah.
But if it was reversed, it would be the only story.
That's true. Yeah, there'd be no doubt about it. And this is just one of those things that in some ways, I guess he just benefits from being so, cartoonishly corrupt and outside of the mainstream in the way he does everything, that they say, well, yeah. I mean, certainly for a normal politician, there would be no end of investigation of this. How could you not? But for Trump, well, he's dealing with corrupt guys all the time. This is we can brush this aside.
All right, I've said enough about this. Trump, speaking of Mr. Distraction Trump, just tweeted.
Yes. Oh, he's out there.
Failing New York Times has disgraced the media world, gotten me wrong for 2 solid years.
Oh.
Okay, that's the normal Trump, right?
Yeah.
And he's actually said the last line, but he says it again today at 10:27 a.m. Change libel laws?
Yeah, go ahead. Try and get
Change
that to the
libel
floor.
laws. This is President of the United States. We've normalized this, and it's incredible. This is going to be a non-story, and it should be an absolutely outrageous story. The President of the United States is trying to intimidate the press again, and not just by calling them dishonest media, which, okay, call them what you want. But now you're threatening to change the laws?
Yeah.
That's not a chilling effect? Come on.
I'm curious whether he knows how that's done.
Right, that's true. It's by executive order.
Right. Stroke of a pen. No, I don't know when you'd get that to the floor. I mean, I suppose if you tried to, by the way, if you're trying to get Gorsuch through by simply exhausting Democrats and not using the nuclear option, the answer is not anytime soon. That's not going to be a high legislative priority, probably ever in the Senate or the House, for that matter. But I guess he could convince the House to try and bring it up because they'd be rah-rah Trump, but sure. And good question for one more round of Gorsuch hearings, too.
Exactly.
How do you feel about
this
idea?
I did have Nunes. I don't know if you want to talk about that.
Sure. Yes, Nunes. It's about time to pay some more attention to what's going on.
He's
crazy.
It's truly incredible. Let's take to me what is the most incredible, most recent situation.
All right.
I know everyone's focused on, he went to the White House, and they're right. That was unbelievable.
Well, yeah, he went somewhere and didn't sign in, and nobody says who meets with him, and he just shows up at night and he squeezes through the fence or something. I don't know.
He is the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee. And that obviously colors all these other things we're talking about. But this is the one that I still don't understand.
Mm-hmm.
He said he's not going to share the information or tell the rest of the committee who his source is.
Yeah.
I has that ever happened?
I don't know. It might be time to change the libel laws.
The chairman of the Intelligence Committee says he's not going to share intelligence he gathered with the committee.
I can't.
Maybe the committee can subpoena him.
That could be. We'll hold you in contempt of Congress for not sharing your source. I highly doubt that that's ever happened. Can't imagine that would have happened often in the past. Just to simply, and I mean, I guess it matters to some
his
extent.
power comes from the Congress. He doesn't have personal power here.
Right. But I mean,
his power comes from the institution. Even his power to see the documents comes from the institution.
True.
How can he deny the institution the right to see what he's gathered?
Is it something that what did he do with the information? He had a press conference and he announced it, right? It's not something he's planning to put
He says he
evidence.
gathered information. Well, first of all, he probably revealed classified information, which is a crime, in case anybody cares. I think we no longer care about that.
Right. That's where we are.
That's where we are. And he, of course, had a he went to the White House to meet with somebody who supposedly gave him information. Yeah. And then he went home. Then he went to the White House the next day, had a press conference before he went into the White House to supposedly tell President Trump about this information that he got from the White House, told the president, and then he walked out and had another press conference about the information.
Yeah. So I guess the first legalistic question about it is, on what basis or for what reason would any other member or the entire body of the House have an interest in knowing his source other than that he spoke to the press and I'm curious. You know what I mean? If he's entering it into a report and they're filing it on behalf of the committee and it's entered as evidence of some kind, then you'd say, all right, well, I need to know the source of this or else I can't vote properly on authorizing this report on behalf of the committee. But if it's just, well, I spoke to the press and I said something. Well, where did you hear that? Well, I'm not going to tell you. Well, then you can't use it in the report. Well, okay, I won't. Oh, well, all right then. This is awkward.
This is intelligence that he presented to the press and to the president as important.
Yeah, I mean,
to the work of the Intelligence Committee.
Yes, and in the sense
but I won't give it to the Intelligence Committee.
Right, in the sense that it's sort of evidence in the court of public opinion. I guess how would a court deal with this? You're free to weigh the probity of the evidence, given the fact that he won't reveal who the source is. You can all discount it appropriately, but if it's not entered into the record in the case, I'm not gonna force him to reveal his source. I mean, for right now, you can and should assume he made it up. No one can stop you from doing that. In fact, I could have the rest of the committee should have a press conference and just say, we think he made the whole thing up. We think he's just an inveterate liar and he made the whole thing up, and see how he reacts to that. I mean, I guess it was, I'm going to change the libel laws. But, and then he either says, well, I don't have to tell you because, these reasons. I'm not using it for anything. It's something I said and you're angry about it and I'm annoyed about a lot of things, but as long as I don't need to use it for any official purpose, I don't owe you any explanation of how I got it. And then we'd just sort of be at a stalemate here. On the other hand, I guess it's possible that, you might say, for instance, here's an idea for somebody who's bored in the House of Representatives, and I guess it would be would fall to Nancy Pelosi in order to set the scheduling of it just right, because as minority leader, she'd be able to be recognized to do this. But someone can make a motion on the House floor and pose a question of the privileges of the House and say there is a House committee chairman, the Intelligence Committee chairman, by virtue of his position as a member of the House and as chairman of the Intelligence Committee, has gained access to this knowledge, the source of which is extraordinarily important to the House, and it calls the House itself, in addition to Congressman Nunes's integrity, into question, that he's making public pronouncements about this intelligence that he supposedly got and refuses to disclose from whence it came so that we can evaluate its seriousness both as members of the House and others as members of the public. But to leverage the power, as you pointed out, that's vested in him by virtue of his membership in the House and his chairmanship of the committee, this way impugns the integrity of all members. And we should either see him censured before the House, reprimanded. There should be or discuss it in terms of an ethical violation, or see him either forced to recuse or removed as Intelligence Committee chair. I don't know. It won't go anywhere. That's obviously something that they could just table, but you could get some, an hour of floor time in prime C-SPAN viewing hours to put that out there and build a case for his removal as chairman.
I think that makes sense, and I'll tell you why. Nunes actually is a hot ticket today, these days, because his behavior has been completely flabbergasting, and at least to the degree that I'm experiencing cable news, he's coming up a lot. Mm. So if you put Nunes in your story, you're probably getting some coverage. So I think that's actually probably pretty smart political play.
We'll circulate that, type it out on Twitter for the rest of the day, and see if we can raise some interest in it.
I do think it would get some coverage, maybe some traction. By the way, I know you were talking about Jamie Gorelick.
Yes.
There's a Jamie Gorelick update. She announced that, or maybe this isn't new, but it was new to me, that she announced that Ivanka's not going to be divesting.
Ah, there we are. But she's going to be disclosing.
Apparently not even having a blind trust or anything.
Yeah, because why not? Well, I'll tell you this. Those of you who believe that Democrats can't learn hardball tactics from Republicans are wrong. If they are hired to fight on behalf of Republicans, good Democrats can learn how to fight with spines of steel.
Well, listen, here's my argument on all this politically. Hardball is hardball. The Republicans will do what they have to do. And I think adjusting your strategy because you think they're going to behave differently on the quote next one, unquote, is just foolish. And if Devin Nunes will do as much as you let him get away with without the rest of his Republican colleagues feeling the brunt of it, it's there's not a rush to defend Nunes, but there are some members of his committee, the usual suspect types, Peter Kings and those types. But, Graham and McCain do have some constituency. Certainly on the Senate side, I think you'll see Burr is making every effort not to be Nunanized. You don't want to be that guy right now. In any party. I mean, he's not winning points with anybody. I mean, it seems to me. I mean, they may defend him because they think that's to do, at least on some level. Ryan defended him, but what's he going to do? But I think that Nunes has put them in a tough spot. It's hard to defend.
Yes. Well, that's true. I just, my point was more about growing a spine when it comes to defending Ivanka Trump's unwillingness to divest. This would ordinarily be out of the question, but of course we've come to accept it because we've been living that way for a couple of months under her father's so-called administration. So
that's all normal.
And
it's
Jamie,
funny. I was in
Jamie
D.C.
Gorelick's going to help.
I was in D.C. the last 3 days.
Yeah.
On legal stuff. And I was surrounded by Trumps. I was across the street from the Trump Hotel, and it still boggles my mind that the GSA said, no problem.
Yes, we have something on that as well. As a matter of fact, we might perhaps move to that. By the way, I need to correct something. I had said that Jamie Gorelick was Deputy Attorney General in the Obama administration. She was not. It was the Clinton administration. By the way, yes. So I wanted to put this in some perspective. In private practice, when Ivanka Trump is her client, she's going to she's going to make the zealous advocacy here for against the need for Ivanka to divest.
Hey, far be it from me to criticize Jamie Gorelick. If Ivanka needs me to be her lawyer, here's my retainer I would need from you. Call me. I'm ready to go.
I mean,
I'll come on your show,
do that.
David, and I'll defend the heck out of all the unethical things she's doing.
I just wanted to say that in case you were wondering, like, well, what kind of person can do that? Well, of course, any lawyer can do that. But maybe you thought, well, geez, I mean, Deputy Attorney General, seriously, though, to go from that, I mean, what about, dedication to ethics in government and everything? Yes, this is, by the way, the job that was until recently occupied by the venerated Sally Yates. So I guess even I don't know whether Sally Yates would take a retainer to do this, but in case you were wondering who else has occupied this position, again, we're talking about Deputy Attorney General. Jamie Gorelick was succeeded by Eric Holder in that job.
No, it's a big job.
It's a big-time job. And after Holder left, 2 down the road from Holder was James Comey, who also occupied that job, and a couple down the road from there, James Cole, who, by the way, if you're going way back, James Cole was the special counsel on the investigation of Newt Gingrich back in the day, and delivered the report to the ethics committee that ultimately doomed, at least in his tenure in the House, doomed Gingrich, but of course he came back like a zombie. Cole was succeeded then by Sally Yates. Then Yates, of course, succeeded quickly by Dana Bonte, and then later, finally, the new nominee, anyway, Rod Rosenstein. So it's a big time job, and but when you go back into private practice.
Okay, breaking news: Sam Brownback vetoed Medicaid expansion for Kansas. And his reason was, and I say this without irony, this is his sentence from his tweet, it does not prioritize the vulnerable.
Oh. What? Okay. What? I'm not even certain what that's supposed to mean.
The next sentence explains his mindset. It does not defund Planned Parenthood.
Those vulnerable.
Those
vulnerable. I got you now.
The old saw, Republicans love fetuses but hate babies.
Yes. Well, I guess that's true. Wow. Well, okay, that's good for breaking news anyway. I mean, it's interesting as breaking news. I thought it was a little unlikely that Kansas would jump over at this point, but it was interesting that they had handed him the bill at the very least. But no, he vetoed it. I've got a piece here. We don't have time to really go into it, but maybe we'll explore it perhaps either off the air or maybe even next week. But I'll share with you. There was I think, New Yorker piece further exploring the craziness of that GSA letter.
Oh, well, if you want to revisit that, let me know. I love that.
Yeah.
I love that story. I hate that story, but I'm very interested in it.
Yes, exactly. Well, we'll try that out perhaps next week. And as tomorrow will be a pre-recorded show as I head off to one of the school recitals for the kids. It's important to be there for that. Other piece of breaking news I'll give you just for you to chew on your way out the door. I saw The Hill reporting that one of Trump's daughter-in-laws has a new job. She's joining the Trump campaign digital vendor. You remember the Pascal guy. Now Giles or Gills, I'm not sure how he pronounces it. Pascal, one of the not Cambridge Analytica, but the other big data dude who came to wrangle things for the Trump campaign is now taking Lara Trump, Eric's wife, on the company, of course, based in San Antonio, Texas. So it's going to be a long commute for Lara Trump, except she'll actually be working out of Manhattan to do the job. And you'll never guess where she's taken an office. Trump Tower. Unbelievable. Who could have guessed? So everybody's getting new jobs. Ivanka, Lara, the boys are out on their own apparently, but they've inherited the Trump organization, so their hands are full. It's happening everywhere, but I guess employment in private industry, there's nothing much we can do about that one. So we got to wrap it up here. Thanks, Armando, for coming on and discussing
Thanks,
things.
Dave. It was fun.
Appreciate it. We'll talk to you probably next week. Reminder again, once again, tomorrow's show pre-recorded, but I promise you, I've already read a good portion of it. It's fun and interesting, and a lot of it is about the weirdo Stephen K. Bannon, and it's about time for us to catch up on what he's been up to and the weirdness behind, well, what drives what's going on in the White House. Anything else that I can or should squeeze in literally seconds? Yes. USA Today, which kind of, sort of falls into the epitome of the mainstream media, I guess. Maybe just by virtue of calling itself USA Today. But they're on the bandwagon here. Trump's business network, it says in their headline, reached alleged Russian mobsters. Oren Dorel with that headline in USA Today. So congratulations to them for jumping on that story. It's good to have you here. But yes, as a matter of fact, Trump Tower and Trump buildings all over the world are stuffed to the rafters with Russian mobsters. It's about time that we got more reportage on that obvious problem, and we're happy to have them along for the ride. Perhaps we can add some of that to our Friday programming mix. If not, though, we'll be back on Monday to catch up with all of the weekend happenings. Not sure where the Donald plans to spend his weekend. However, if he is back out at Trump National here in Virginia, that will cause some problems for us, as we will be delivering Boy Scout mulch over the weekend. I'll be carrying my allotted portion of some 13,000 bags, 40-pound bags of mulch. Look forward to doing the show on Monday from Traction in the hospital off the laptop again. If we can get the microphone rigged up, I can ask Greg for medical advice and see how the following week goes. A lot of Advil in my future, I think. What about what's coming up next on Netroots Radio? The answer is here. It's Thursday. It's the Thank God It's Jovadi show. I love the foreign languages when we know how to pronounce them. Former Tea Party Congressman Steve Stockman is hit with a 28-count indictment over charity fraud. No stranger to indictments, Steve Stockman. After fear-mongering about Ebola in over 100 tweets, Trump, that is Donald, now proposes to slash the agency working on a vaccine. Why not? And Vladimir Putin ascribes a Bush the Elder quote to Reagan while reaching out to his new conservative American friends at a CNBC interview. On the last half, they'll be reporting that Trump's Interior Secretary insists clean energy is a hoax, and the Trump administration decides Trump is not violating the corruption clause of his government lease that prevents him from being both a tenant and landlord at his hotel.
From Daily Kos Radio on netrootsradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
Yes, you have, and we thank you for it, and we thank you for your sustaining contributions. Don't forget us over at patreon.com/KagroX if you'd like to join in on the monthly support. Do stay tuned then for that story about the Trump Hotel, and remember, he can be both tenant and landlord because he's the president and you're not.